I'm Charles All. I am the Executive Director of the Kentucky Chamber Center for Policy and Research, and we certainly appreciate everyone taking some time out of their afternoon to talk about an exciting new program that's getting ready to launch here in Kentucky, which is the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership. And so what we're going to do in this webinar today is kind of talk through some of the ins and outs of this program. Like I said, it's getting ready to launch. We have a fantastic guest here that can really dig into the weeds on it and talk about how this program will actually work. And I'll introduce Andrea here momentarily. I'm going to provide a little bit of background information on the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership so folks can understand kind of where it came from and what some of its goals are and how the chamber was involved in it. And then Andrea will talk through the actual implementation and how the program will work, both from the employer perspective and sort of how the cabinet is managing the program. I want to start a little bit with just a quick background on the genesis of where this program came from. Back in 2021, the Kentucky Chamber Foundation published a report called Kentucky's Workforce Crisis that studied some of the long-term trends in Kentucky's workforce challenges, but also looked at some of the key causes. And one of the core arguments that report made was that Kentucky has a multitude of different challenges that are shaping our current workforce issues in the state. And that includes a whole range of different things. But one of the most important challenges that report identified was the issue of having access to good, high quality childcare that individual workers can afford. And I think that's one of those things that's, I think, fairly intuitive, probably to a lot of the folks on this call. If you simply can't afford to ensure for the safe care of your child, it's really hard to work. And so that's really one of the problems that we set out on trying to address in this previous legislative session. We could talk about a whole bunch of data that gets into that, but I do think that just a quick sampling of these headlines gives everyone a really good sense of how real this challenge is for a lot of working Kentucky families and how this prevents a number of Kentuckians from being able to actively participate in the workforce. So in the 2021 session, we worked with Representative Samara Heverin, as well as a number of different partners, including childcare providers, business leaders, workforce development professionals all throughout the state to craft legislation that led to the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership. This was an exciting bill to pass. It was something that I think is very different than what a lot of other states have done. But ultimately, we think it's something that can be really helpful to both employers and working families in addressing some of the childcare challenges in Kentucky. I'm not going to get into the full weeds of the program. I'm going to leave that to Andrea here in just a minute. But the basic concept behind the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership is that it is a public-private partnership model to encourage and empower employer engagement in this space. We talk to a lot of employers who are all very eager to do everything they can to address some of the childcare challenges that their workers face. And we wanted to kind of create a new tool that would empower them to do that. And that's exactly what the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership is designed to do. Basic idea behind the Employee Childcare Assistance Partnership is that if you're an employer and you want to contribute financially to one of your workers' childcare costs, the state will step in and partner with you in that through a matching program. There's a lot of rules, a lot of details that are involved in that. And I think Andrea can kind of walk through some of those here momentarily. But I do think one of the things that's important to remember is that this is a very innovative program. It's something that's very new. Not a whole lot of other states have this. And so if you are a Kentucky employer, this is an exciting new thing that maybe your counterparts in Indiana or Tennessee or wherever that might be, they're not going to have this. And so this is something that I think is exciting and unique, but it is a pilot program as well. And one of the things that comes with that means we're going to be learning a lot over the next year or so about what works with this program and also maybe what doesn't work with the program. And to that end, the legislation included a lot of reporting requirements that Andrea and her team are going to be working to gather a lot of this data and to learn what's worked, what hasn't worked. On top of that, the legislature appropriated about $15 million that will be available effective in July. And so that aligns with the state's fiscal year. And so that's a pretty good chunk of change that we can use to support a lot of the employers that want to utilize and participate in this program. With that, I want to turn things over now to Andrea Day. Andrea is the director of the Kentucky Division of Childcare. And before I hand things over to her, I really just want to thank the cabinet and to thank Andrea and her team for the work that went into this. They stood up an entire new program. And they are already a very, very busy and important state agency that's accomplishing a lot of critical work to support childcare challenges and to support everyday Kentucky families and workers and employers. And so we really appreciate their hard work and dedication in standing up this program. So with that, Andrea, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Well, thank you so very much for giving me this opportunity to come and speak about the new employer child care assistance partnership. As Charles said, it is very new. There's not been a statewide program rolled out like we have. There's been smaller versions in different states, and we've talked to those states and asked them questions like, if you were starting this program today, what are some things that you would want to avoid? What are some things we need to think about? Because ultimately we want this to be a success. Childcare across the nation, as well as just in Kentucky, is a critical workforce support. It's the foundation for all other industries. And so how do we support that? How do we get our communities engaged? And I think House Bill 499 really opened the door for us to be able to provide this partnership. And while it was certainly daunting in the beginning of, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? And so quickly, we've really reached out to a lot of folks to, like I said, to learn from them and to make it as simple as possible for the employer, the employee, and the provider. So we here at the cabinet, our CCAP payments team is going to handle all administrative work associated with this program in year one. So we will be manually accepting applications and entering those into a spreadsheet. And I know that seems very basic. But as you all know, technology, it's a great thing, but it takes time to develop that. And so we are working behind the scenes to hopefully next year have that capability for you once we learn our lessons from this rollout that starts on Monday, April 3rd. There is the cabinet website is available that has some information out there. The application for this program will be available on our website as well as through the Connect portal, which is Connect is all things public assistance. If you need food assistance, medical assistance, KTAP, all of those things, it's there for folks to go out. We already have a separate tile that breaks down the information. The application will be live on the 2nd, which is Sunday. We held that back. That way we didn't get inundated before the official rollout. We are very excited about this because, like I said earlier, childcare is probably is the family's most expensive ongoing cost besides their mortgage every month. I know when my daughter first started, we paid almost as much as our mortgage to have her in childcare. And this is a way for employers, they don't have to be on the hook for the total amount. They can determine how much they want to contribute towards their employees' cost of care. We are, the bill, the way it was written, 25% of these funds will go to small businesses, which is 50 or smaller. Is that correct, Charles? 50 employees or smaller. And also, priority will be given to employers who pay 33% or more of their employees' childcare costs. That was another provision. So those are things that we're going to be looking at to make sure that we have the state funds available. As Charles mentioned, there is a sliding fee scale, if you will. The state will match 100% of a contribution if the family is making 100% of the state median income. And I just now realized that I did not bring that number with me. So I'll circle back to that. And then for every 20% above the state median income, it reduces the state match. So those are all things that there's a lot of math involved. And I know if you go out there and you look, you're going to be like, oh no, this is a lot. But please reach out to our staff. We are ready to answer your questions. We stand at the ready to walk you through this process. It's new for all of us, not just you. And so with that being said, give us a little grace and patience, because we're all learning this together. I mean, we have the bones, we have the structure, but as business people, you know that if you plan for every situation, there's going to be 6 that pop up that you did not anticipate. So again, our staff stands at the ready to help you in whatever way we can work through this process. Let's see. Charles, I don't know if anybody has any questions. I don't think yet. What other information would be helpful here? I know I talk fast and I apologize. I kind of tried to drill that all down into a small, nice little bite, but
Yeah, no, I think that's good. We'll jump into questions here in just one second, Andrea. Folks on the call, take a look at the resources that you can see up here on the page that I've shared here, and I believe Claire is trying to share some of these direct links on the chat feature to all the attendees as well. But you can go to the Division of Childcare website, which is posted right here, and we can send all these links out as well in a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the webinar. But you can utilize this, and that will that initial link, and that will take you to eventually where the application itself will become available on April 2nd. As Andrea said, though, applications, that's on a Sunday. They'll start receiving those applications though as early as April 3rd. There's also, that's a great place to find more information about additional state childcare resources, including the CCAP program, which is the state subsidy program. And so that's always an important program to be aware of as well. You can also go to the Kentucky Chamber website, kychamber.com/childcare, and there is a number of different resources available for that program, including links to the cabinet's website as well. So that's another way that you can access the cabinet, is just going through the chamber website. We have added some new resources to that page recently, including a new FAQ on the Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership, and that was developed in partnership with the cabinet as well as Kentucky SHRM, our Society for Human Resource Professionals, who helped us put together some of the key questions that employers might have and some good responses to those questions. Also on the chamber website, you can find a resources guide that will include information not only on the Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership, but you'll also be able to find information related to other types of childcare solutions that you might consider offering for your employees, including things like federal tax credits, various grant programs, other types of third-party vendors that can also help you with managing some of your childcare benefits. There's a whole range of different things that you can consider. And then another key tool that we provided that you can find on that website address is a recommended employee survey template. And so one of the first steps that an employer might consider if they're looking to participate in the Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership is first engaging the childcare needs of their workers. And this survey template that we provided can provide a really good foundation for how you might go about determining, okay, who within your workforce needs some of these resources and what types of things might be helpful. Andrea, I'm going to start looking through questions here in just a second, but could you maybe just give a quick overview of, I guess, the initial steps? So you're an employer, you have downloaded the application from the cabinet's website. What are the couple of steps that you'll need to take before you actually go and submit that application back to the cabinet?
So it's a 3-page application. The first page is to be filled out by the employer. The second page is by the employee, and the third page goes to the provider. And we broke those down in that manner. That way, when a family goes to the provider's not looking at their full household income and all of those things. But the provider is able to provide the cabinet with their rate and their billing cycle, and also the children that they'll be providing care for. we tried to keep this as high level and simple as possible because we know that the HR liaisons at the employers, they've got a lot on their plate already. We didn't want to make it more cumbersome for them. So it really is more about the employer verifying employment and the hours and things like that. And then the employee, like I said, puts in their household information. That way we know that our staff can see. One, it's for a couple of reasons. One, if that family would meet our child care assistance program, which is the federal subsidy based on their income, we'll refer that family to CCAP. But then also, if for us, for this program, it shows us where they are in relation so that we can calculate our match.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Good question here is if you're an employer and you have an employee that's not going to have childcare services until later. So in this instance, the example here is October. Can they still go ahead and apply now?
Yes, go ahead, send that in. One of the provisions of the legislation was that we keep a wait list if we have so much interest that there's a wait list. So one of the ways that we are tracking and being responsible stewards of this money is when we approve someone for childcare with their state contribution and their employer contribution, we're projecting that out for the length of the contract, which is through June 30th of next year. That way we make sure that that money is there to cover those folks. So go ahead and apply, and we could issue the contract starting, let's say it's October 1 through June 30th of next year. That way we're calculating that amount of funds for that person.
And then, of course, Andrea, if let's say they start it in October and then they find out in, say, February of 2024 that for whatever reason, maybe that there's been a separation with that employee, or they have changed their childcare arrangements, could you talk through some of the steps that an employer would need to go through to basically terminate the agreement?
So they would need to contact us immediately to let us know that. But also, let's say that the provider was going to change, or they're having another child. The next window will open up again in April for them to apply for the next round in 2024. So that's something to always keep in mind, that once we issue a contract, it is good for 1 year. That is for one fiscal year, July 1 through June 30th. But any terminations or changes, just notify us immediately to make those, because if you're going to change providers, we're going to have to do a whole new contract, because the initial contract is between the employer, the employee, and their provider. So any changes to any part of that would require a new contract.
Great. There's a good tax question that's been included here. Andrea, I think I've kind of helped answer some of those tax questions. If you want me to jump in on this one real quick. The question is as the employer, you would be providing a payment on that employee's behalf to a childcare provider. Would that be considered taxable income on behalf of or for that employee? That's a really important question to ask. I'm going to caveat my response to that by saying always talk to a certified tax professional, whether that is your in-house accountant or a CPA or a tax attorney. Generally speaking, though, the IRS allows for up to about $5,000 in qualified dependent care assistance in a taxable year to be excludable from taxable income. And the state of Kentucky follows that guidance. So in other words, there is a threshold of up to about $5,000 in a year. And as long as you don't exceed that, that generally should not be considered taxable income. And again, the state follows that treatment at the same as federal. So I think that's going to be an important threshold for employers to keep in mind in determining how much, what the ceiling might be before that needs to be considered taxable income. And that is also something that we address in the new FAQ that I mentioned just a bit ago. They can also be found on kychamber.com/childcare. Andrea, another question is concerning public employers. This one, I know the law that was passed by the General Assembly speaks pretty clearly to this, but can public employers participate in the program?
Sorry, I was struggling to find the mute button there for a second. My understanding is it is not for public government agencies to participate. These are more the private sector.
That's right. Yeah, and I know that was an issue that came up quite a bit during the legislative process over whether or not public employers would be included. And I think the general sense was they wanted to roll it out for private employers first, and then maybe bring in public sector employers after they've gone through this pilot phase. So that's certainly something to watch for. I guess a question here is, how can agencies best survey individuals who aren't working, who would be encouraged to work, knowing there is this new support? So in other words, how might this encourage folks who are currently not employed to consider joining the workforce because of this new program? Andrew, I'll speak to that one since that one's probably not cabinet specific, but if you have thoughts on it, do chime in. I would anticipate for a lot of employers, if they find this program to be successful, this could be a really important talent attraction tool. And so if you are potentially working with a job candidate or an individual who would be able to work if they were otherwise prohibited due to childcare challenges, this is something that I think would certainly entice people to join the workforce, knowing that they might be able to have this support if it was available to them. Let's see here.
Charles, I'm going to jump in for just a second, if you don't mind. So the cabinet is working on a marketing campaign to be statewide. Hopefully in the next week or so, you'll begin seeing ads and hearing ads on radio and TV, also on various social media platforms. We're really trying to promote it to make more folks aware, because I hate to say women, but statistics show us 80% of women are the ones that are responsible for seeking and providing care and making sure they have childcare for their families. So we're really targeting that population up to age 50, I believe, to really promote the work that we hope to accomplish with this initiative.
I'm going to storm through a few of these questions, Andrea. In terms of who's responsible, I guess, for initiating the whole process, is it the employer or the employee or either?
Well, the employer obviously has to be on board because they're the ones that are going to be making that match. But I think employees are in a really unique situation to where if they find out about this program or they know about it, to take it to their employer, to take it to their HR, and to start having those conversations. Maybe it's not a conversation they've had already. So, I think it's twofold. Technically the employer has to initiate because they have to be willing to make that contribution. But I think the employee could initiate that conversation internally within their organization.
Is there a minimum or maximum that the employer must match or that the employer must contribute to qualify for the program?
There is not.
And what size employers are eligible to participate?
Any size. As I mentioned earlier, 25% of these funds are reserved for small businesses, which are 50 or less employees. So, but it's open to everyone.
And are nonprofits eligible to participate?
Nonprofits would they be, Charles, I'm going to defer to you on this one, because with that, they're still a small business, aren't they?
Yeah, as long as they're a privately operated nonprofit and not, say, a quasi-governmental agency, that might be more questionable. But if you're a privately operating nonprofit, you would qualify as a private business in this instance. So that should be based on the letter of the law. A little bit of a complicated one here, Andrea, can you have, if you have both parents are working, and both parents work for an employer that participates, do you have a sense of how that works in those situations?
Well, so that has come up in one of those brainstorming sessions when we started talking about this. I think technically they both could contribute, but we're only going to be met. That might be tricky. I think with the way it currently is written, and I'm looking over to my CCAP section supervisor, with the way it's written, I think we would have to honor both of those.
Well, it would depend on how
much the contribution,
tuition
right?
is to-
Because one of the pieces of the bill, let's just say hypothetically, the mom's employer is going to pay $400 a month, dad's employer is going to pay $500 a month, right? So there's $900 that the state's going to match, but that family's total tuition bill is $1,300. Okay, we're not going to exceed that cap or what their actual tuition is. Does that make sense, or did I muddy the waters?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And for context, Andrea is speaking specifically to how the legislation itself is written, which is the ultimate payment to a provider is capped at the total cost. So there's no situation. So in other words, the state would essentially not match in full in that situation. So the state match size would essentially decrease because the employer contributions would be large enough to cover most of the cost, is the way that would work. Could you speak briefly, Andrea, to where payments actually go? So the employer makes their contribution, the state makes their match. Where do those dollars actually go?
All the payments go directly to the provider. The employer would be paying the provider and the state would be sending the contribution to the provider.
Great. I think this question is one, Andrew, you might need to take back to kind of go talk through with your team. The question, though, is whether or not a university or community college, how they would fall within the definition of employer, whether or not they would be considered a public employer or a private employer. And that might be one for you all to weigh in on.
Yeah, I will. I'll have to consult and send you that answer. And maybe we can add that to the FAQ once we do have that answer.
And then at some point, theoretically, funds will become depleted. Is there a process in place that would essentially advise, I guess, maybe an update on the website that would advise individuals that applications are no longer being accepted, or how would that work?
Yes, we would put that out on the DCC website. We would also, I think we would put that out on Connect as well, so that anyone going to seek information gets a consistent message. One thing I want to, so yes, once funds are depleted, then we won't take any more applications. But the way that we have structured this is those applications that we receive and are approved, we are projecting for one full year. So it's not that this was the intent of the question, but let's say you've signed up, there's not going to run the risk of we're not going to have the money to honor that full year's worth of a contract.
Great. I'm going to do one more question, then we'll wrap things up here in a minute. And the question is there a way we can do this for our employees in an in-kind way? In the specific instance here is that this individual or this business is opening a childcare facility for their employees. And so if you're opening an on-site center specifically for your employees, would this program be a benefit in that particular instance?
I think that would come down to a business decision on how you wanted to do that as a business. I mean, because with the way the reg is written, it's based on the financial match. Or, the whatever the employer is going to financially contribute, and then the state matches that. I don't think at this current time I don't think the in-kind is a possibility at this point.
And I would say to the individual that asked that question, if you're a for-profit entity, I certainly would encourage you to take a look at the employer-provided childcare tax credit at the federal level. So if you're in the process of actually opening a facility, and that's something that you can learn more about on the Chamber's website, where we talk a little bit about that particular tax credit program.